Nuclear whistleblower crash. On November 13, 1974, Karen Silkwood drove north on Highway 74 in Oklahoma. She was 28 years old and worked as a technician at the Kerr-McGee plutonium fuel fabrication plant near Crescent. For months, she had been gathering evidence of safety violations at the facility. She served as a union representative and had been documenting what she believed were falsified quality control records. That evening, Silkwood was heading to Oklahoma City. She had arranged to meet with David Burnham, a reporter from the New York Times, and Steve Wodka, a union official. She was carrying documents that allegedly proved the violations she had been investigating. The meeting was scheduled for later that night at a Holiday Inn. At approximately 7:10 in the evening, Silkwood left a union meeting at the Hub Cafe in Crescent and got into her 1973 white Honda Civic. Less than 30 minutes later, her car left the road. The Honda traveled off the left side of the highway and struck the wing wall of a concrete culvert. The impact was severe. She was pronounced dead at the scene. When authorities arrived, Silkwood was found alone in the vehicle. Investigators examined the wreckage and the surrounding area. The documents she had been carrying were not found at the crash site. An autopsy revealed she had methaqualone, a prescription sedative, in her blood. Oklahoma Highway Patrol officials concluded she had fallen asleep at the wheel. In the days before her death, contamination had occurred at her apartment. Tests revealed plutonium throughout her residence. According to subsequent analysis documented in Richard Rashk's book, The Killing of Karen Silkwood, the particular type of plutonium found in her home came from pellet lot 29 at the Cimarron production area, where she did not work. She did not have access to the vault where these samples were kept. Silkwood believed someone had deliberately contaminated her. Kerr-McGee management alleged she had contaminated herself to damage the company's reputation. The Atomic Energy Commission investigation never established the circumstances of her contamination. A crash investigator hired by the union, A.O. Pipkin, examined the vehicle and concluded there was circumstantial evidence suggesting another vehicle had struck her car from behind. He found the steering wheel bent on the sides and noted damage to the rear bumper. The Oklahoma Highway Patrol maintained their conclusion that she fell asleep at the wheel. Silkwood's family filed a lawsuit against Kerr-McGee for plutonium contamination. In 1979, a jury awarded the family $10.5 million. After appeals, Kerr-McGee settled out of court for $1.38 million without admitting liability. No criminal charges were ever filed in connection with her death. The circumstances surrounding Karen Silkwood's death remain disputed. Bangladesh garment collapse. On April 23, 2013, inspectors discovered large cracks running through an 8-story building in Savar, a district on the outskirts of Dhaka, Bangladesh. The building housed several garment factories on its upper floors. The lower floors contained shops and a bank. The damage was significant enough that the shops and bank closed immediately and refused to allow employees or customers inside. The following morning, April 24th, the factory owners on the upper floors made a different decision. They ordered workers to report for their shifts. Management at Ethertex reportedly threatened to withhold a month's pay from workers who refused to come to work. Approximately 3,600 workers arrived at the building that morning. Roughly 80% of the workers were young women. At 9 o'clock in the morning, the building collapsed. The structure had been built in 2006 and was owned by Sohail Rana. The building had been constructed on land that was once a pond. Investigators later determined that the upper 4 floors had been built without permits. The building's architect, Masood Reza, stated the structure was planned for shops and offices, but not factories. Heavy industrial generators installed on the upper floors created constant vibration. The combination proved fatal. Floors pancaked downward. Concrete slabs crashed into workspaces filled with sewing machines and people. Workers on multiple floors were trapped beneath rubble. Rescue operations began immediately and continued for 17 days. The search for survivors ended on May 13th. The official death toll reached 1,134 people, including rescue workers who died during the operation. Approximately 2,500 people were injured. Many survivors had been trapped for hours or days before rescue. When authorities attempted to locate Sohail Rana, he had fled. A 4-day manhunt began. He was attempting to reach India when police found him near the border and arrested him. He was charged with murder along with 37 other people. In 2017, Rana received a 3-year sentence for corruption related to the building's construction. The Rana Plaza collapse became the deadliest disaster in the history of the garment industry. The building housed factories that supplied major international brands including Benetton, Primark, Walmart, Mango, and The Children's Place. International investigations documented the warnings that had been ignored and the illegal construction methods used throughout the building. In response to the disaster, over 200 apparel companies signed the Accord on Fire and Building Safety in Bangladesh in May 2013. Texas City explosion. On April 16, 1947, the SS Grand Camp was docked at the port in Texas City, Texas, near Galveston. The French cargo ship was loaded with 2,300 tons of ammonium nitrate fertilizer bound for Europe. The chemical was commonly used in agriculture and packaged in paper bags stored in the ship's holds. Early that morning, smoke was detected coming from one of the cargo holds. The ship's crew attempted to contain it using steam, but the fire continued to spread. At approximately 8:30, the Texas City Volunteer Fire Department was called. Members of the Volunteer Fire Department responded and boarded the ship. They began working to extinguish the flames. At 9:12 in the morning, the ammonium nitrate detonated. The explosion was massive. A mushroom cloud rose into the sky and remained visible for miles. The blast generated a 15-foot tidal wave that swept across the dock area. The shock wave was reported to have been felt up to 250 miles away. The ship was completely obliterated. The pier and surrounding structures were destroyed. The explosion triggered secondary fires throughout the port. The nearby Monsanto Chemical Company plant caught fire and was destroyed. 16 hours later, another ship docked at the port, the SS High Flyer, also carrying ammonium nitrate, detonated in a second massive blast. When rescue operations concluded and bodies were recovered, the official death toll reached 581 people. Among the dead were all but one member of the fire department who had boarded the Grand Camp that morning. Only one firefighter from the responding crew survived. The exact number of casualties has been reported with some variation in sources, with estimates ranging between 400 and 600 people. The Texas City disaster remains the deadliest industrial accident in United States history. The explosion destroyed much of the port facility and caused extensive damage to the surrounding community. Subsequent investigations examined the safety procedures for handling and transporting ammonium nitrate. The disaster led to changes in regulations governing the storage and shipment of hazardous materials. Railroad trestle filming. On February 20th, 2014, a film crew arrived at a railroad trestle over the Altamaha River near Doctortown in Wayne County, Georgia. They were filming scenes for Midnight Rider, a biographical film about musician Greg Allman. Sarah Jones, a 27-year-old camera assistant, was working on the production. The crew planned to film a dream sequence on active railroad tracks. They had not obtained permission from CSX Railroad to be on the trestle. A metal hospital bed was placed on the tracks as a prop for the scene. During filming, a CSX freight train came around a curve. The train was traveling at 58 miles per hour. The crew had less than 60 seconds to evacuate the trestle. Workers grabbed equipment and ran. The train struck the metal hospital bed. The impact created shrapnel. Metal fragments flew in multiple directions. The debris struck Sarah Jones. She sustained severe injuries and was pushed into the path of the train. According to the autopsy report, both of her feet were severed. She sustained multiple fractures and lacerations. She was pronounced dead at the scene. 7 other crew members were injured in the incident. Hairstylist Joyce Gilliard suffered a serious injury. Following the incident, criminal charges were filed. The director, Randall Miller, was charged with felony involuntary manslaughter and criminal trespassing. He pleaded guilty in March 2015. He was sentenced to 2 years in jail, with 1 year to serve in prison and 1 year on probation. As part of his sentence, he was prohibited from serving as director on any film for 10 years. Executive producer Jody Savin and first assistant director Hilary Schwartz also pleaded guilty to charges related to the incident. Miller became the first Hollywood director held criminally responsible for an on-set death. CSX Railroad was later found to have civil liability and ordered to pay $3.9 million for failing to adequately prevent trespassing on their property. The film was never completed. The incident led to increased scrutiny of safety practices in film production and prompted discussions about industry-wide safety reforms. North Sea platform disaster. On July 6, 1988, 226 workers were stationed on Piper Alpha, an oil production platform in the North Sea, approximately 120 miles northeast of Aberdeen, Scotland. The platform was operated by Occidental Petroleum. Around 10 o'clock that evening, a maintenance communication failure occurred. A pump designated as Pump A had been taken offline for maintenance. A critical safety valve had been removed from the equipment for repair. The valve's absence was documented in a permit to work form, but the information was not properly communicated between day and night shifts. When pressure dropped in the system, workers on the night shift activated Pump A, unaware the safety valve was missing. Gas began leaking immediately. Within minutes, the gas ignited. An explosion tore through the platform at approximately 10 minutes past 10 in the evening. The firewalls installed on Piper Alpha had been designed to withstand oil fires. They were not built to handle gas explosions or the resulting pressure. The walls failed. 2 other platforms, Tartan and Claymore, were connected to Piper Alpha through pipelines. Both platforms continued pumping oil and gas into the burning structure for an extended period. Shutdown procedures were not immediately initiated. The fuel fed the flames. Workers faced a critical decision. The accommodation module where many had gathered was filling with smoke. Some workers chose to jump 175 feet into the North Sea. The water below was covered with burning oil. Others remained inside the accommodation module. The platform began to collapse. Metal structures twisted and fell into the water. Rescue vessels approached, but faced difficulty getting close due to intense heat and falling debris. 167 people died, including 2 rescue workers from the fast rescue craft Sandhaven. 61 workers survived. Most survivors had jumped into the sea. The platform was completely destroyed. An inquiry led by Lord Cullen followed. The investigation examined the maintenance communication breakdown, the failure to shut down connected platforms, and inadequate evacuation procedures. The Cullen Report, published in November 1990, resulted in 106 recommendations. These led to fundamental changes in safety regulations across the North Sea oil industry, including revised permit-to-work systems and improved emergency response procedures. Port Chicago naval explosion. On July 17, 1944, cargo handlers worked through the evening at Port Chicago Naval Magazine in California, approximately 35 miles from San Francisco. 2 ships were docked at the pier, the SSEA. Bryan and SS Quinault Victory were being loaded with munitions destined for the Pacific Theater during World War II. 4,600 tons of high explosives, incendiary bombs, and depth charges sat in cargo holds and on the dock. The United States Navy assigned predominantly African-American enlisted men to handle the loading operations. The military maintained strict racial segregation. Black sailors performed the hazardous work of loading munitions while white officers supervised. The enlisted men received minimal training for working with live explosives. Officers encouraged competition between loading divisions to increase speed, with implied penalties for slower performance. At approximately 10:18 in the evening, a massive detonation occurred. The explosion completely destroyed both vessels and obliterated the pier. The blast registered as a magnitude 3.4 earthquake on seismographs across the San Francisco Bay Area. The shockwave shattered windows in San Francisco and Oakland. Witnesses reported seeing a fireball and mushroom cloud. 320 men were killed instantly. 202 were African-American sailors assigned to loading details. The dead also included white officers, Coast Guard personnel, and civilian workers. Approximately 390 people were injured. The Navy conducted an investigation but could not determine the cause of the explosion. Within weeks, the Navy ordered surviving sailors from Port Chicago to resume similar munitions loading duty at Mare Island Naval Shipyard. On August 9th, approximately 320 men gathered at Mare Island. After being ordered to load munitions, 258 men refused, citing unsafe conditions and inadequate training. The Navy charged 50 men with mutiny in what became the largest mass mutiny trial in United States naval history. Thurgood Marshall, then chief counsel for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, traveled to observe the court-martial proceedings. All 50 men were convicted in October 1944. They were sentenced to 15 years in prison and dishonorable discharge. The Port Chicago disaster and subsequent mutiny trial drew national attention to racial inequality in military service. Civil rights organizations protested the convictions. In 1946, 47 of the 50 convicted sailors had their sentences reduced. The Port Chicago case is considered to have influenced President Harry Truman's decision to issue Executive Order 9981 in July 1948, which desegregated the United States Armed Forces. Beirut port blast. On August 4, 2020, a warehouse at the port of Beirut in Lebanon stored approximately 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate. The chemical had arrived at the port in 2013 on a ship called the MV Rosas and had remained in warehouse 12 for nearly 7 years. Government officials had documented knowledge of its presence. Multiple warnings had been issued by port officials and customs authorities between 2014 and 2020 about the danger posed by the improperly stored material. No action was taken to remove or properly secure it. At approximately 6:07 in the evening local time, the ammonium nitrate detonated. The explosion was one of the largest non-nuclear blasts in history. The detonation was estimated to be equivalent to between 500 and 1,100 tons of TNT. A massive mushroom cloud rose over the city. The shockwave was powerful enough to be felt in Cyprus, approximately 150 miles away. The explosion created a crater approximately 430 feet in diameter where the warehouse had stood. Buildings across Beirut sustained severe damage. Entire neighborhoods near the port were destroyed. Windows shattered across the city, with damage reported up to 6 miles from the blast site. Structures collapsed. The port facilities were obliterated. Approximately 300,000 residents were displaced from their homes. Rescue operations began immediately. Teams searched through rubble for survivors. Hospitals throughout the city were overwhelmed with injured people. The official death toll reached at least 218 people. More than 7,000 were injured. International investigators and forensic experts arrived to examine the site and review documentation. Evidence showed that senior government officials, including the president, prime minister, and multiple cabinet ministers, had been informed about the stored ammonium nitrate and associated risks. Documents revealed that at least 10 officials knew about the warehouse contents and its dangerous condition. Port and Customs officials had sent multiple written warnings requesting the material be removed or secured. Criminal charges were filed against senior officials in Lebanon. However, the judicial investigation has faced repeated obstruction. Court proceedings have been suspended multiple times due to political interference. Several charged officials have refused to appear for questioning, claiming immunity. As of 2026, the investigation remains stalled and no trial has taken place. Justice for the victims has not been achieved. The explosion exposed systemic corruption and negligence within Lebanon's government institutions. West Virginia mine explosion. On April 5th, 2010, miners reported for their afternoon shift at Upper Big Branch Mine in Montclair, Raleigh County, West Virginia, approximately 30 miles south of Charleston. The mine was operated by Performance Coal Company, a subsidiary of Massey Energy. Federal records showed the facility had received numerous safety violations. In 2009 alone, the mine received 515 citations from the Mine Safety and Health Administration. At 3:27 in the afternoon, methane gas ignited underground. Federal investigators from MSHA later determined the ignition source was likely sparks created when a longwall shearer cutting machine struck sandstone rock while cutting coal. The initial methane ignition triggered a series of coal dust explosions that traveled through more than 2 miles of underground mine tunnels. The explosion was catastrophic. 29 miners were killed. The ventilation systems designed to prevent methane accumulation and disperse coal dust had failed to function properly. Safety equipment did not perform as required. Rescue teams entered the mine but found no survivors beyond the initial group that escaped. 2 miners were injured but survived. Federal investigators from the Mine Safety and Health Administration conducted an extensive investigation. The investigation lasted nearly 2 years and involved examination of the mine structure, equipment, company records, and testimony from miners and management. The final report, issued in December 2011, concluded that flagrant safety violations by Massey Energy directly caused the explosion. MSHA documented systematic safety failures. Evidence showed methane monitors had been disabled or manipulated. The mine's rock dusting program, designed to prevent coal dust explosions, was inadequate. Investigators found that mine management had advance warning of federal inspections and concealed violations. Workers testified they had been ordered to prioritize production over safety. Some miners reported they feared retaliation if they reported unsafe conditions. MSHA issued 369 citations and orders against Massey Energy related to the disaster. The company was assessed to $10.8 million in civil penalties, the largest in MSHA history at that time. Criminal charges were filed against executives. Don Blankenship, chief executive officer of Massey Energy, was indicted on federal charges in November 2014. Prosecutors presented evidence that Blankenship knew about safety violations and prioritized production and profit over worker safety. In December 2015, Blankenship was convicted of conspiracy to willfully violate federal mine safety standards. He was sentenced to 2 years, of which he served 1 year in prison and fined $250,000. The conviction marked a rare instance of a major corporate executive being held criminally responsible for workplace deaths. 3 mine supervisors also faced criminal charges. 2 pleaded guilty and 1 was convicted at trial.